The impact of grief, here it is, right here. It can blow your world up. That's the impact. It can blow your world up. Your world will not be the same. And you're going to have to deal with the reality that your normal doesn't exist anymore. And you can't go back to normal because it's been blown up. And so what you're going to have to do is go on this journey where you experience this grief. You hopefully learn to embrace it, and you heal from it, and you build a new normal in your life. But that is how powerful that grief can be in your life. It can have a radical effect in your life, way beyond what you imagine. Here's the way we roll. We're born into the world, and the problem is it's a broken world, and bad things happen to bad people, which we don't have a problem with that, do we? You reap what you sow. Let's be honest about it. We don't have a problem with bad people suffering bad things. But then in the broken world that we live in, good people suffer too. And sometimes good people suffer more than bad people do. And that's kind of hard to figure out and accept and live with that. But the fact is, we're going to suffer loss of people or things that we have become attached to over time. And when we suffer that loss, it's going to have an effect on us. One of the things it does that's often not recognized is it confuses your brain. Now, a lot of times, in our ignorance, we think that grief is a purely emotional experience. It is way more than that. Grief is something that is a serious issue with your brain. I would almost go so far as to say it's like having a brain injury. You know, we have now recognized this whole thing about concussions. And in sports, if somebody has experienced some sort of a hit and they have sustained an injury where we're concerned about them, we might decide that they've had a concussion and they go into concussion protocol. And we treat them uniquely because they've had a brain injury. Have you ever thought about loss having that kind of an impact on your brain? And actually, you're suffering from a brain injury. I'm going to read to you a section of a book called The Grieving Brain. This book was written by a neuroscientist. She has spent years and years in her life studying the effect of grief on the brain as a neuroscientist. She's seen all the MRIs, the CAT scans. Now, in addition to this, she's uniquely qualified to address this issue because she's also a psychologist. And among the therapies that she does grief therapy. This book is really fascinating, and I want to read to you a section of this book. Even when a person has been ill for a very long time, no one knows what it will be like to walk through the world without this other person. My contribution as a scientist has been to study grief from the brain's perspective, from the perspective that the brain is trying to solve a problem when faced with the absence of the most important person in your life. Grief is heart-wrenchingly a painful problem for the brain to solve. And grieving necessitates learning to live in the world with the absence of someone you love deeply who's ingrained in your understanding of the world. This means that for your brain, your loved one is simultaneously gone and also everlasting, and you are walking through two worlds at the same time. You are navigating your life despite the fact that they have been stolen from you, a premise that makes no sense, that is both confusing and upsetting to your brain. It is way more than an emotional experience. The Cleveland Clinic, on their website, has this observation about things that we experience in life and the impact they can have on our brain function. Confusion is a symptom that happens because of brain activity disruptions. Any condition, circumstance, or event that disrupts your brain function can cause confusion. Loss is an experience that can cause brain confusion. I have often heard people use the term fog or foggy, how fogged up they felt, how foggy their brain function was, and they felt like they were living in a fog in their life. This is a part of that quote out of this book that I just read, The Grieving Brain. Notice what it says. about it necessitates learning to live in the world with the absence of someone you love deeply. You didn't want to lose them. See, loss isn't a choice. Loss is something that life forces on you. Life gives you a whole bunch of really cool blessings. You know, here's the person of your dreams. Here's marriage. Isn't that wonderful? And then here's a house that you've really been working toward for a good long time. But then sometimes life comes along and says, here's something else. Here's cancer. Well, I don't want cancer. Life doesn't care what you want. Life's just going to force you to deal with certain things in your life. Not only can it be the loss of your health, here's the loss of your son, your daughter. Here's the loss of your job. Now, those are gifts that you don't want. Now, women sometimes get gifts they don't want. Now, what do you women do when you're given a gift? This is confession time. This is the confessional booth here, okay? What do you women do when you get a gift that you don't want? You re-gift it, okay? That's a good... Now, there's a lot... Now, women are very creative, guys. Listen real careful. There's going to be more than one here. Okay, you can re-gift it. I remember being in Murray City, Tennessee, and I was working with the church there. The church I finally got to accept me after my wife passed away. And I was at a Christmas Dirty Santa party. And so, you know, the gifts were being exchanged and moved around and all that. And then, you know, finally I end up with this gift. And then everybody opens their gift, you know, one at a time. So I open the gift, and it's a set of mugs, his and hers. Boy, I remember the sigh in that group, because here I was, a widower, about 2 years out from my loss. And then the husband, guys, take note of this. The husband said, in that group setting, with all those people there, I told you that wasn't a good gift to get. Men, you can think things. You don't have to say everything you think, okay? But I understood what happened, and the first thought I had was, I'll re-gift it. I've got 3 daughters. They're hitched. I won't have to pay for their birthday gift or their Christmas gift. So yeah, you can re-gift it, okay? What else could you do with a gift you don't want? Women, come on. Put it high on a shelf in a closet, and you'll not see it until you move from there 10, 15 years later. You'll see it, you'll look at it. That is the ugliest, dumbest thing I've ever been given in my life. Then you'll probably throw it in the trash, okay? So you hide it so that you'll never see it again. What else might you do with it? Look, guys, have you listened to this? Man, have we lit the fire here? Okay, somebody over here? Put it in a yard sale. Or give it to Goodwill. Write it off your taxes. You gave it to Goodwill. Okay, now, here's the point I wanted to make to you. Sometimes life gives you things you don't want. And you're stuck with them because would you re-gift your loss to somebody else? Can you take your loss and stick it in a closet somewhere, close the door, and never see it again? You're stuck with it. Life sometimes gifts you things like that. And when it does, your brain is going to struggle. Yes, ma'am. Say thank you. When you're given a gift that you didn't want, say thank you. And do it with the right tone of voice. Good recommendation. We're just learning all kinds of good practical stuff about life in this Bible class. Well, say that again. Yeah, whoever gives it to you might matter. Mm-hmm. Yeah, use it for decorations. You women are so creative. But one really harsh thing for your brain to accept is the fact that certain things are forced on you that you can't pass on to somebody else. And you wouldn't even if you could. And so you're really going to struggle with this issue. Now, in addition to the impact of grief confusing your brain, in addition to that, you've got this issue with Now you've got an emotional element here too. Grief messes with your heart, with your feeler. And when you have your brain messed up because of the brain function, and now you've got the feelings that are running real strong, you've got a serious problem. This is the best book I've ever read about grief. Way better than my 3 that I've written about marriage and widowhood and grief. This book was written by a male and a female, both of whom had lost their spouses. Both of whom came from different backgrounds. One, a professional nurse, the other more in what's called the pastoral counseling kind of area. And together they wrote this book. And what's really neat is you read a section where this is what the guy says, and then here's what the female says. And it's just a really interesting book, very thought-provoking. And it's good not just in regard to the loss of a spouse, but it's good in regard to grief generally. The guy made this observation in the course of this book. Actually, research shows that generally it takes an average of 6 to 9 months for one's brain, cognitively, see there's the healing process from the brain injury, and the heart, emotionally, to connect and accept that the person has died and cannot come back. Have you ever thought about, if you had the power to bring somebody back, would you? And even if you had, let's say you had the power to bring them back, and if they were ill and died because of an illness, you could bring them back healthy. Would you bring them back? I've been asked that question in regard to my loss. My wife had Parkinson's disease for 8 years plus, deteriorated really fast because of that disease. Would I bring her back? No way. No way. If I could bring her back healthy, would I bring her back? Absolutely not. Why? Being with the Lord is way more important than being with me. So I need to deal with the fact that she's gone. But that is a really hard thing for your brain to accept. Because you see, she's gone, but yet she's here. Where is she here? Between my ears. One of the things that this neuroscientist points out is that people and even things are folded into the proteins of your brain. And you've got neurons popping in your brain. Hopefully you've got them popping in your brain. And you've got brain activity there. And so people and things, they get folded into your brain. And she points out that sometimes the brain operates like a virtual map, like these games that kids and some adults play. And you've got this brain is just kind of floating around trying to reset. See, you know, your computer, you can reset your laptop or your computer. But your brain takes way more time than that to recuperate. And then in addition to that, you've got these feelings that are struggling inside of you. And the power of feelings should not be underestimated. James Dobson, who recently passed on, wrote a book called Emotions, Can You Trust Them? In a book he wrote later, Life on the Edge, he basically said, I can summarize a book I wrote with one word. No. Emotions, can you trust them? Well, no. He spent 200 pages dealing with the answer to that question. Later, he says, I can answer that with one word. But boy, emotions are real. They may not always be consistent with reality, though. He said, we must understand that emotions are unreliable and at times even tyrannical. Boy, they can really dominate us. They can be so strong that they can compel us to act in ways inconsistent with our thinking, and we don't even realize it. The reality is, when we've suffered great loss, we need to recognize that we have entered into an intensive care phase of our life where we need unique care. Now, anybody here ever been in an intensive care unit as a patient? I'm curious. Oh, we do have. Okay. Now, can you imagine being in an intensive care unit and, you have these buttons to push, when you want somebody. Oh, by the way, why were you in the intensive care? Were you too good to be with the people on the floor? Why did they stick you in an intensive care unit? You needed more help. Hey, if you're visiting at the hospital, here's what I encourage. If you're tough, if you got guts, I encourage you to interact with nurses and ask them, what's the nurse-patient ratio on the floor today for you? Now brace yourself with the answer. He or she may be dealing with 7, 8, 9 patients, depending on their situation at the time. Now, when you go into intensive care, what's different? Patient ratio, way different. Sometimes it can be one-on-one. You can't get away with anything. They know about your heartbeat, your blood pressure, and they're just coming in all the time, and maybe they might even be there in the room all the time, watching you like a hawk. Why is that? Well, you needed special care. There are times in your life when we just need to realize you're not Captain America. You're not Falcon. You're not Superman. You're not Wonder Woman. You're not the Bionic Woman. You're not the $6 million man. You know what you are? You're a mere mortal human being. And just like when you're physically in jeopardy and you might end up in intensive care, there are circumstances in our life that can have such a powerful impact in our life that we need to accept the fact, you know what? I need help. You know, for some people, that's really hard to admit that. Do you know there are some people, I'm sure none of us, were raised with really stubborn, independent parents? And the reality is it doesn't skip a generation. Sometimes we can be so thick-skulled, so hard-hearted, so independent to a fault that we will not accept the help of others. And you know what's even harder? Is for some people to ask for help. That's way, way out of their league to go that far to ask for help. So, you know what you're going to do? You're just going to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And have you ever thought about how arrogant that is? And have you ever thought about how arrogant it is when people say, I got this, I got this? Where's God in that perspective? In either one of those perspectives, where's God? Where's the recognition of the fact that we're mere mortal human beings and we need help? Where is it? Let me suggest to you a totally different philosophy of life. No matter what's going on in your life, no matter how harsh or how horrible the circumstances might be, God's got this, and I've got God, and this is going to be okay. I don't know when, I don't know how, but God's got this, and I've got God, and this is going to be okay. You know when that Parkinson's disease was okay for my wife? At 9:40 in the morning on Christmas morning of 2013, that's when she drew her last breath. It's better than okay now. She's with the Lord. We need to recognize our need for God and the people that He's blessed us with in our lives. It's okay to recognize the fact you need help in your grief-stricken journey. And it's okay even to ask for the help, though we might be embarrassed in doing that. Another thing that grief does to us is it prompts us to ask the question, why? Now, isn't it interesting that when we enjoy some wonderful prosperity, we don't ask why? Have you ever had a guy up here getting hitched, and maybe before everybody leaves, he stops and says, hey, I want to say something to all of you who are here. I can't believe, I just don't understand why in the world God blessed me with this wonderful woman. You know, you have this baby born into your life, daughter, son, granddaughter, grandson. I can't believe God has blessed me like this. We're not so good at asking the question why in prosperity. We human beings have a tendency to focus on that question when we're suffering, when we're struggling. And it's a natural, normal thing. And I want to make sure that you have no guilt about this. So to help you with that, I've got some guys who are going to be reading some passages just to prove to you the fact that it's okay to ask this question. Now, I'd like to start with Job because he's my buddy. I love Job. I love his struggle. I love the challenges that he experienced. None of you fellows have this passage, do you, in Job? Okay. Let's go ahead and start. We're going to have some readings. Listen carefully if you can't find this in your Bible that quickly. Go ahead. Technical difficulties within our control. Come on up here. Job chapter 3, verse 11 to start with.
Why did I not die at birth, come out from the womb, and expire? Why did the knees receive me, or why the breast that I should nurse?
Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter of soul? Verse 23, why is light given to a man whose way is hidden? Job asked the question, why? Who's next up? Psalm 74. The psalmist.
A maskil of Asaph. O God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? In verse 11. Why do you hold back your right hand, take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them?
The psalmist is asking God, why? Things are not like they should be, in his opinion. Okay, next up. So he's asking the question, why? Judges chapter 6, verse 13. This is my favorite one. Gideon, a great man of God, deliverer for the people of Israel.
And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles which our father told us of, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us, and delivered us unto the hands of the Midianites.
Gideon said, why has all this happened to us? He said, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? What does that suggest about his thinking if God is with us? What's he thinking? How should life be? If God is with us, how should life be? Grand, wonderful, blessings. See, even Gideon asked that question. W.T. Hamilton, who was the son-in-law of Gus Nichols, wrote a book based on that question in Judges chapter 6, verse 13. Why has all this happened to us? Why? We're so inclined to ask that question, why? Who's got the passage in Jeremiah 20?
I said I had it.
That's like a spooky sound in a horror flick.
Why did I come out from the womb to see in toil and sorrow, and spend my days in shame?
Jeremiah was one of the most persecuted prophets in the Old Testament. At the end of that chapter, really the second half of that whole chapter there, he is struggling with the great persecution he's having to experience when he has chosen to be a prophet of God. It doesn't make any sense to him, and he just wonders why in the world was he even born? To go through this, he's really struggling. Okay, how about Jesus on the cross? Go ahead. Matthew 26. Yeah. Go ahead.
And about the ninth hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani? This is my God, why have you forsaken me?
Is it wrong to say why? To ask why? Is it wrong to ask the question why? Jesus did it, so no. Great logic, okay? If Jesus was sinless and Jesus asked the question why, then it's not a sin to ask the question why. It's a very common, ordinary thing. I think the humanity of Jesus is depicted in him asking that question. Well, I think H. Norman Wright is correct. One of the greatest feats of life is learning to live without answers. Brother Charles Hodge said, faith doesn't give us the answers. Faith gives us the ability to live without answers. Faith does not give us the answers. Faith gives us the ability to live without answers. I think Brother Hodge was correct. But we're going to be prompted to ask the question why. It's just a natural, normal thing. What we're simply pointing out is it's powerful. Grief is really, really powerful in our lives. And it's not just something that affects our emotions. Mentally, emotionally, psychologically, socially, physically, and even spiritually. It has a powerful impact in our lives. It's okay to grieve. It's a natural, normal thing. It's a reaction to severe, difficult circumstances in our life. And it impresses us with the fact that we need help. We definitely need help. Can you imagine having a son, 7 years old, die? Josh is the preacher at the Main Street Church in Pikeville, Kentucky. And their 7-year-old son died. Can you imagine having a 28-year-old son driving in his little blue car in Trenton, Tennessee, and having an awful automobile accident and losing that son at 28 years old, who's only been married about 1,300 days? Dennis is one of the shepherds of the 151st Street Church in Olathe, Kansas. And they've been living with that loss, just like Josh and April have been living with the loss of their son. Imagine losing your spouse. Imagine losing your spouse who took his life, in Tandy's case, going from left to right. She saw him in the pool of blood and saw the gun next to him. Imagine being 34 years old, being awakened by your 36-year-old husband having a heart attack, pulling him off the bed, giving him CPR, calling 911, and then a couple of days later, they decide to go ahead and harvest his organs because he was an organ donor. The most powerful Facebook video I've ever seen was the day that Emily posted her husband being pushed in his bed down the hall toward the operating room for his organs to be harvested. And that hallway lined with medical people standing in silence, honoring him, and all you heard on the video, beep, beep, beep. You know Cheryl Wayne LaHawn, some of you, because he's been here before and did a singing emphasis type workshop here. He was married to his wife, Kathy, and he has been living with that loss for the last 14 years. The next person, November 10th, will be the 20th anniversary of her husband's passing. 20th anniversary of her husband's passing. She had 3 kids at home, and she was in her 40s when her husband died of cancer. The guy in the middle there, in a few days this month, is going to be the 3rd anniversary of his wife Sharon's passing. The next person was in her late 50s when her husband passed away. And then, of course, I lost my wife at 61. When you lose people in your life especially, it is going to be a challenge like you've never had before. And I want to encourage you, while we finish up our study, to turn in your Bible to Romans chapter 5 if you have one. Because I think this is a point that we need to drive home and internalize in our life. Romans chapter 5 begins with a reminder about our justification by faith. And in this great book, we're encouraged to understand we're free from sin because of the justification through Jesus Christ. But yet, in this book, at this point, there's a turn to a very practical issue. Romans chapter 5, verse 3. And not only that, on top of all the spiritual blessings, And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations. Now, if I were writing this, I would say we grieve in tribulations, because we do. And he's not saying that we don't grieve in tribulation. What he is pointing out here is that not only as human beings are we going to grieve in our tribulations because of what we're losing in those tribulations, but in addition to that, as Christians, we can glory in tribulations. Is that radical or what? Is that wild? Isn't that amazing that we as Christians can glory in tribulation? How in the world could that possibly be? Watch what he says. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance. Where does the perseverance come from? That beautiful blessing of endurance, where does that come from? From hardship. And not only that, but we glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. Now, hope does not disappoint, because of the love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit, which God has given us. He goes from tribulation to perseverance to character to hope. Where did it start? It started with tribulation. It didn't start with prosperity. It started with heartache, with trouble, with stress, with pain, with difficulty. I have a daughter in Gainesville, Florida, who's a DPT, Doctor of Physical Therapy. She married one too. Now, you may think of the traditional PT, but actually, they're not physical therapists, they're pain terrorists. What they do is they inflict pain in your life. And they do that with purpose, with intent. They inflict pain, they cause you to experience pain to get you to a better place. Why does God permit us to suffer? Why in the world would he do that? Think about this, how that every burden that Satan brings into your life, every single burden, you can take and turn into a blessing. You can use it as the very thing in your life to help you to become stronger, your faith more refined, more pure, more genuine, and you now have experience that can help you help other people better than you ever have before. Satan brings it into your life, you take that burden and you turn it into a blessing. And you get in the face of Satan and said, we win. You lost. Do you believe in the devil? Do you believe in the devil? I've never once heard a Christian get mad at the devil because of some hardship in their life. I've heard Christians blame God. I wonder if we believe in the devil. What he brings into our life as a burden, by the grace of God, we can take and turn into a blessing. Use it to help us be refined and better than we've ever been before, and more capable of bringing glory to him by helping others. Don't ask for more burdens. Satan is going to take care of that matter. But depend on God and the people he blesses you with providentially in your life to get you through every hardship you experience in life. Thank you for coming to Bible class this morning.